Hello and welcome to another Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. Today I shall be making over this Bedford tipper Matchbox number 3B. This was made 1 year before I was born in 1961. Recently one of these was sold for £200. Originally these came out in maroon and silver, but later they came out in red and silver. For the record, the red and silver ones are less valuable. This particular model, I believe, has been driven over in somebody's driveway. As you can see, the chassis is twisted, the cabin is crushed, the A-pillars are missing, destroyed, the other intermediate pillars are distorted, broken, the whole cab's just misshapen. This side here is sticking out. Back end is, should be flat but it's concave. The side's been crushed in. And the tailgate is totally missing. The flange on the end of the pivot there for the tray has been ruined. The tyres have been scored or scarred by the compression it experienced. Luckily this has multiple tyres on it, so I should be able to swap them over. So the damaged ones are on the inside and therefore not visible. First up, I'm going to remove the tip tray pivot pin and remove the tray from the chassis. Using a flat blade hobby file, I'm going to file away the flange on the tipper tray pivot pin so I can easily remove it. Here I'm using some long nose pliers to assist me in removing the pivot pin. Next, as usual, I shall be using my Dremel to remove the flange from the axle ends so I can remove the wheels from the model. After wearing down the flange, it is a simple case of pulling the wheels off the axle. Now it's time for the front wheels. These wheels are so gummed up with paint, I've got to use pliers to help me get them off. When I'm doing multiple projects, I have to keep all the parts in numbered bins. This way I don't get them mixed up. Many of my subscribers have recommended that I use caustic soda to remove the paint rather than paint stripper. So I'm going to test out this theory and give it a go. Here I am putting 2 heaped tablespoonfuls of caustic soda in about 500 ml of water. I've placed a digital clock there so we can monitor the time that the object's actually in the solution. I'm using a coffee stirring stick to mix the solution thoroughly. Now I am placing the objects into the caustic soda solution. Check the time there, 18:34. Let's see how long it takes. Right, it's now been 20 minutes, so I've come back to check. Let's have a look. Right, I give them a quick stir, and I'm taking this piece out here. Doesn't really look like much has happened, there's still paint on it. Maybe the red one's different. Let's have a look at that one. Nope. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. Okay, I'll put them back in. Another 20 minutes later, I come back, give them a prod and a poke again. Take them out, let's have a look. Not much happening there at all. I'm thinking I'm going towards the paint stripper. Leave them in for a little bit longer. Okay, now these parts have been in this caustic soda solution for 1 hour and 10 minutes. So maybe they need a little bit of agitation with a toothbrush. Well, it doesn't actually look like anything is happening. It has done absolutely nothing whatsoever. So I guess I've busted that myth. Unless somebody out there can tell me what I'm doing wrong, I'm not convinced the caustic soda works. Here's a small tip that might help you to remember what colour the model is after you've stripped it with paint stripper. I've collected a load of paint sample catalogues and I keep them and I put them in a folder and I use them for reference so I can remember the colour that the original model was when it comes to respraying it. So for example here the tipper tray closely resembles this colour here, which is called Indian Red Gloss. So I'll remember that. And the truck itself is Going Grey. So now finally I'm going to strip the paint off these and get them ready for repainting. I always forget because I'm in such a rush. Just a reminder, you should be wearing rubber gloves when you're using this paint stripper, and for that matter if you're using caustic soda. As usual, I'm using a spare toothbrush that I found around the house to remove the softened paint in a bath of water. Well, that's the tipper tray done. Now it's time for the chassis and cab. Now these are stripped down to the bare metal, we can have a good look to see what we've got to work with. It doesn't look good. This vehicle is distorted in all directions. Here's some of the details on this model anyway. There's leaf springs at the back there, quite cleanly cast. And on the left hand side of the vehicle there's a tiny little exhaust pipe and muffler and a couple of I guess fuel tanks. The actual casting on the tray is quite good. The original lines are very crisp. Unfortunately this is twisted, like somebody stomped on it. It's going to take a bit of effort to fix this up, I think. First up, I've got to get this tab in that groove. That'll be the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to leave the base on for this one, and it will give me something to work towards. So I'm in my shed and I've put the model in my vise. I'm using a punch and a small hammer just to try and gently tap this front end back into shape. As you can see, I'm holding the vehicle in the vise using a block of wood there and some spacers which I've used. They're actually nuts, so that I don't crush any of the other parts of the model whilst I'm trying to fix the bits that are already bent. Now the cabin is distorted, so I'm just levering it using a long screwdriver and my hands to get it back into shape. Next, the chassis rails need to be realigned. Again, more blocks of wood. And a little bit of gentle pressure in the right direction. Oh, that's better. The rails are now at right angles to the cabin. Here you can see the rails were also slightly twisted, so I'm going to straighten them now. I'm being very careful here not to overdo it. I don't want to risk cracking the metal. Now it's time to finally address the broken pillars on the cabin. I'm hoping to repair these using the legs of a split pin cut to size and glued into place with my special glue formula. First up, I've got to cut off the stubs of the old pillars to make room for the new. I cut them off using a cutting disc in my Dremel. I next grind the stubs flat so that the cut legs of the split pins will fit neatly into place. I've now got to remove these two pillars from the driver's side. Next, with a hand file, I remove any burrs that may be remaining. The legs of the split pin are perfectly suited for this purpose. The reason being is because they have one flat side and the other side is slightly rounded, and when they're fitted they look the same as the original cast pillars. Whilst I'm here with my files out, I thought I'd take my thin rat tail file and try and just reform the profile on the bumper bar. It was slightly deformed during the reshaping of the front end. Now it's time to cut the legs to the correct length and glue them into position. To position the new pillars accurately, I use tweezers, and I also place masking tape inside the cabin to form a layer onto which I can position the pillar. The masking tape holds the pillar in place whilst I apply the glue. Here I am making minor adjustments to the length of the pillar using a flat file. When I am happy with the length, I place it in position on the masking tape. Using a toothpick, I make minor adjustments left or right as required. When I'm happy with the positioning of the pillar, I apply the superglue, immediately followed by the baking powder to form an instant strong bond. After the glue and baking powder has set, it forms a very hard resin-like substance that you can file into shape. I'm now going to repeat the process a few more times until I'm happy with the final results. After some filing, this is what it looks like. As you can see, there is still some work to be done. Now it's time for me to do the other side. Again, using the superglue and baking powder, I'm reinforcing the pillars. This time I'm using a combination of craft knives and files to shape the windows. I'm happy with that. It looks like it's ready for undercoating. Here is what it looks like after I've applied the undercoat. It's starting to take shape. Now I'm having a go at straightening out the tray using some long nose pliers. I'm trying to be really careful so I don't accidentally break the sides off. Okay, that seems to have worked. Now I've just got to get that distortion out of the floor. I've also got to straighten the front end out. I've cut this piece of wood to fit exactly into the tray. Now I'm going to whack it with a hammer and hopefully take that bow out. Let's have a look. That seems to look good. Now I'm going to do a similar thing to the side with a thinner piece of wood. Lastly, I've got to get that twist out of the tray. I'm using a packing piece here to spread the load over the mud flaps. I'm adjusting my monkey wrench to fit, and it's just a little tweak at a time. Check it. If it's not good, put it back in, do it again. I think I've nailed it. Right, finally, it's time to paint. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I'm using water-based acrylic paints. The idea is to keep the model on the move so that no runs develop. Using a crocodile clip, I'm holding the tray by one of the mud flaps. When I've finished and the paint's dry, I'll have to touch up the mud flap with a paintbrush. I'm now going to reform the end of the axles to hold the wheels on. I'm using two modified nails that have a cup drilled into their heads. Once fitted in the drill press, I use them to deform the end of the axle. As you can see, it looks really neat and looks just like the real thing. There's one more pivot pin to put in at the back and we'll be finished, with the exception of the tailgate, which I'm still waiting on, having ordered it from overseas. Here's a bolt I've placed in a vise and I've surrounded it with rags to protect the paint on the truck. I'm going to use this to reform the end of the pivot. Holding the truck with my feet, I carefully place the punch over the end that I'm going to hit. A couple of strikes with the hammer and the job's done. Here I've chipped the paint with my toenails by accident, so I'll be touching that up with the paintbrush. A tiny bit of paint and the job's done. The original model didn't come out with a painted grille, but because it's a plain model, I thought I would jazz it up a bit. I'm going to paint the grille, headlights and door handles silver. Finally today my tailgate arrived in the mail. Here it is. I can't say I'm very impressed with the quality, but sometimes you've just got to use what you can get. As you can see, there's a lot of imperfections on the edges. I'm going to use a flat file to get rid of them and clean it up a bit. Okay, I've just got to go and paint this red and then fit it on the truck and I'll be finished. Right, here's what I started with today. As you can see, it wasn't in very good condition. In actual fact, I was going to throw it away, but my wife said, "Nah, give it a go, see what you can do." So I did. Okay, now I know it's not perfect, but overall I'm quite happy with how it turned out, considering what it would look like when I first started. Thanks for everybody's support, and so long as you guys keep watching and liking what I do, I will keep doing it. And hopefully one day I will have a perfect restoration. Ah, Jesus, I can't get the f***ing lid off. Are you?